All right. Thank you. We got Schuyler Callihan here from Mountaineers Now. Appreciate you taking the time, Schuyler, and talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an exciting week. Can't wait for this game. It's been over 10 years since this game's been played, and I think both sides, fans, schools, teams, they're all excited for this. It's been something that probably should have never been this dormant, but here we are.
I agree with you. And you're coming to the game. You're going to be here in Pittsburgh on Thursday, right?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'm actually making the trip up Tuesday morning, so it'll be
Sounds good.
a couple of days to get acclimated.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm going to first ask you a little bit about West Virginia. We can get to know the Mountaineers. So just generally, what's the energy like around Morgantown, around this team, and what do you expect from this team? Kind of big picture in 2022.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think before the JT Daniels transfer, I think it was kind of a weird feeling. It kind of felt like the fan base was kind of falling away from Neil Brown in terms of they didn't trust the climb anymore. There was a lot of questions about his future. And when you lose guys like Akeem Messador and Daryl Porter to the transfer portal, Winston Wright, a couple of other big time receivers as well, it's just kind of had a weird feeling like this team was about to bottom out, and it just did not have a good feeling, good vibe at all. And then JT Daniels just he comes in and it's like an injection of excitement and energy around this program again. And they've went out and got some junior college guys, some other Power Five transfers as well. They even got some transfers like Rashid Ajayi from Colorado State, Wesley McCormick from James Madison, both cornerbacks. So I think the feeling 3 months ago was completely different from what it is now. I think if you ask a lot of fans now, I think they believe this team is a team that can compete in the Big 12 and maybe be a dark horse to sneak into that Big 12 title game.
Gotcha. And we'll get back to JT Daniels in a second, but just run me through. You rattled off a few names, some of those transfers, but can you tell me about who the other studs on this team are? I know Dante Stills is a big force on the defensive line, but is there anyone else that maybe is not getting talked about on a national stage or that people in Pittsburgh might not know about that they should know about?
Absolutely. Lee Koba, the Mike linebacker, this dude is an absolute freak. I mean, he just looks like he was built in the lab. I mean, 6'2", 225, 230. Looks like he could play in the NFL right now. Just flies sideline to sideline. He started his career at Syracuse, and interestingly enough, he committed to West Virginia, the old coaching staff, Dana Holgerson. He flipped that commitment to Syracuse, spent some time there. Then he went to East Mississippi, which is Last Chance U, and then found his way back at West Virginia. So he's going to be the starting Mike. And I think the biggest thing, not only with him, but this defense as a whole, is it's bigger, faster, and stronger than it's ever looked. And I think this is kind of what Neil Brown and maybe even what Dana kind of envisioned when they translated from the Big East to the Big 12, having the bigger presence on that side of the ball. And they've kind of struggled doing so. You look at the linebackers that Neil Brown had in 2019. I mean, those guys were like 5'10", 5'9", 205 pounds. I mean, now they've got some legit bodies there. So I think, Lee Coe is definitely a big guy. Charles Woods, the cornerback, who kind of saw limited action last year, but was really good when he was on the field. He's one of the top-rated cornerbacks returning in the Big 12 this year. And then I think on the offensive side, that's a tough one because there's so many moving parts. But I would probably say the one guy that's not getting talked about, probably because no one really knows about him, is Jeremiah Aaron. He's a junior college transfer. Going to see some time on kick return here and there, maybe punt return, but is just super, super fast, very twitchy, can make you miss in the open field. But he's got to fight his way up the depth chart. I mean, they've got a ton of experienced receivers like Bryce Ford Wheaton, Sam James, Reese Smith, and so on and so forth. So, and I'll throw this out there too, Caden Prather, another young receiver they're looking to take that next step and probably be that number one guy.
Gotcha. Yeah, so let's get back to JT Daniels for a second. I don't know exactly what media access at West Virginia is like, but how much of JT Daniels have you seen, and what there's a lot of hype. Obviously, he's a talented guy, but what's realistic to expect from JT Daniels in this offense and in this environment, and how much have you seen of him?
I mean, he's looked just as advertised. I think I think that the expectation of him coming in and just lifting this program to a Big 12 title was probably very unrealistic. I mean, just he's a great quarterback, but he's not a guy that's going to take you that far by just being there. I think there a lot of other factors are going to have to come into play. Other people are going to have to help him out, but I think this is clearly the best situation that Neil Brown's had at quarterback since being in West Virginia. And he said it a month ago on Sirius XM, I believe it was, that this is kind of JT's chance to prove to everyone again that he's an NFL prospect. I think everyone forgets about that just because of all the injuries he's had throughout his career and the transfers bouncing from USC to Georgia to now West Virginia. He's a legit talent. He's just got to stay on the field. And I think having an offensive line that's the entire unit's returning, and those 5 guys up front, I think that's a big plus to keeping them upright and keeping them healthy. So I think he's looked good so far, and I think big things to come for sure.
You mentioned that offensive line. That is something that my limited knowledge of West Virginia, the offensive line has come up a lot. The numbers, the sack numbers didn't look good last year, but as someone who followed this team and knows them pretty well, I also heard that maybe Jared Dake, maybe held onto the ball a little bit too long. There were some concerns there, but from your view, is the offensive line a real concern, or are you hopeful about what that returning unit can do?
I mean, I think the potential is there for sure, but I still have some skepticism towards it because, I mean, this is still sort of a young unit. And it's weird to say that considering this has been the same exact starting 5 for the last 2 years, minus Wyatt Milam, who was a true freshman last year and started. But you look at it across the board, like this is only Zach Frazier's second year starting at center. Now, he played it in high school, but he played left guard his freshman year. James Gmitter had a suspension and battled some injuries 2 years ago. Wyatt Milam, this is his first year playing left tackle ever. He's always been a right tackle. Brandon Yates, they moved him from right to left, or from left to right. Doug Nestor, this is only his second year in the program after transfer from Virginia Tech. So even though it's an older, experienced group, there's still a lot of question marks around that. And I think although there was a lot of times last year where it was Daggy just holding on to the football for 10 hours, I still think that there was some instances where the offensive line just couldn't handle twists well, didn't understand pad level very good. But I think you're seeing some of these guys grow. They're becoming better. And I think it really starts all up in that interior with Zach Frazier, James Gmitter, Doug Nestor. Those 3 guys, they've been stout all offseason long, spring, summer. So I think they're only going to continue to get better. This is a much improved offensive line from where it was a year ago.
You getting back, sticking with the offense, there is a pretty big moving part. One of the biggest ones, if not JT Daniels, is Graham Harrell coming in as offensive coordinator from USC. What do you make of him so far? What will he do differently? What will he keep? What can you expect from a Graham Harrell coached offense that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be kind of what we saw with Dana Holgorsen a little bit. They're going to want to throw the ball as much as they can, and I think speaking to some of the USC folks, that's kind of the one thing that they warned me about. They're like, he'll say he's going to run the ball, but he doesn't. So it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of find a fine balance, because they do have some interesting running backs. Tony Mathis, Justin Johnson, C.J. Donaldson, Jalen Anderson. They have the bodies back there. It's just whether or not he's going to be able to find some sort of a balance. I think Neil Brown will make sure of that they still find a way to run the ball rather than sling it around the yard 60 to 70 times a game like a true air raid offense. So, I mean, he's lived up to it. He said he's gonna run the football, but we'll see. I think he's gonna, in that first couple of weeks, he's gonna rely on what he knows best, and that's JT Daniels.
Makes sense. So, obviously, West Virginia wants to be Pitt for a host of reasons that go well beyond its immediate implications in the 2022 season. But what would a win against a team like Pitt, remove the name Pitt, just put the number 17 team in the country out there, another Power 5 opponent, put them on the field against West Virginia, and what does beating that type of team mean for this team to start off the year?
It means a lot of things. First and foremost, I think it gives Neil Brown some comfort, because I think if you lose this game, again, even if you remove it, it you can't lose trust, not only from within your players, but the fan base and the administration too. You can't lose that trust early in the year. And he's not on the hot seat right now, but I think he could certainly coach his way onto it. And you don't want to get off on the wrong foot, but we can't ignore that it is Pitt, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Shane Lyons, the AD, if they go out there and lose this game to Pitt. That's going to be a hard one for him to recover from, especially if they, stumble to maybe only 5 or 6 wins this year, and that's that kind of a season. I don't know if Neil Brown's back in 2023, but if you win this game, you have the win over a top 25 team on the road, and you've got a fairly favorable schedule for the next couple of weeks with Kansas and Towson. You could be rolling into 3-0 against Virginia Tech on the road. If you win that game, now you're 4-0, probably in the top 25, and getting ready to play Texas on the road. So I think it's going to be a snowball effect. If they win, it's only going to build this thing to something, where they can actually be a legitimate contender in the Big 12. If they lose, it's going to be a bit rocky for Neil.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that schedule, but it sounds like it is pretty soft, like you said, until that trip to Texas. Because as someone who watches the ACC and has watched Virginia Tech and follows them a little bit, I think I like your odds in that game.
Yeah.
Well, great. Yeah. And so just kind of my last question for you, what are kind of the players and coaches, and I guess I see what the fans are saying about this game, but how do you see the players and coaches kind of reacting to this kind of buildup and this hype and this anticipation for a game that, like you said, has been dormant for so long? I know talking to Pitt's players, like they don't really remember this. They don't have a background knowledge of this rivalry.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, a lot of these kids that are going to be playing in this game, last time they played, they were probably only like 9 or 10 years old when that last game was played. So it's definitely different. But I think you got a lot of guys like Dante Stills and Zach Frazier, some of the guys that grew up in Ohio and Western PA that WVU's plucked away from Pitt, like those kind of guys, they understand what it means. And I think Neil Brown's kind of put that in their head since the end of last season, early in the winter. This is what Pitt means to the fans in West Virginia, and this is what it means to the state of West Virginia. And I think everyone's kind of understood it, and I don't think there's going to be any lack of motivation at all. I think this is going to be a very heated rivalry game. It's going to feel, I think, even though it's been 11 years, I feel like it's going to be a game where it just feels like it's been there. It hasn't gone away. I think that energy, that intensity is going to be there from the very moment that that ball kicks off at Acrisure Stadium. So, I don't know how Pitt fans view West Virginia. I know they view it as a rivalry, but I know that there's some folks that say Penn State's maybe a bigger rival. But for West Virginia, this is the game. Like, you cannot lose to Pitt. I mean, that's just the way it is around here. And I think even really going back to the game that West Virginia fans don't like to really talk about, I mean, since that day, I think it's been, oh no, we can't lose to Pitt. It's almost a scaredness because Pitt was awful that season, like just god awful. West Virginia is on the cusp of getting to a national title. So when you lose that game, it's almost like you're nervous for every time you play Pitt after that. So and that's what it should feel like, a little bit of unease for the rivalry game.
Yeah, and I definitely, you brought up the Penn State rivalry. I was at Pitt. I graduated just this past spring, but I was at Pitt, not for the start of that Penn State rivalry, but right in the thick of it. At the time, it definitely felt like, when we're not playing West Virginia, when we see Penn State every year for this huge event, a football game, like we were playing West Virginia in basketball, but it's just not the same thing, especially considering how bad Pitt's been at basketball for the past few years. Like Penn State felt like the big rival, but you can definitely, I think, feel it coming back. I think people just needed to be reminded a little bit of what this game is, because I think there's also that desperation to win. I think I feel that a little bit on the Pitt side too. It's even more than in that Penn State game. We really wanted to beat Penn State, but I agree. The Backyard Brawl feels a little bit more like desperation, quite honestly.
It does. I mean, last year when West Virginia played Virginia Tech, I mean, you still had that intensity, that rivalry for the Black Diamond Trophy, but it's still – I don't think that rivalry even rivals, no pun intended, the Backyard Brawl. I think the Backyard Brawl, honestly, is top 4, top 5 greatest rivalries in college football. I mean, that might be a little biased, but I mean, you look around and I still think that hatred and that dislike is just about as high between these two schools as it is Texas and Oklahoma or Ohio State, Michigan, Carolina, Duke. Like that level of intensity is there. And I think it's not talked about enough. It's not appreciated enough. And I think it's really cool that they're starting this game on a Thursday night in prime time to start the season. Like there's no better way to get this season started off and to bring this rivalry back than the way they're doing it.
Yeah, genuinely, I think this is the stage that this rivalry deserves, especially a renewal like this. You can almost – it seemed like the anticipation's been building for a long time, and
yeah,
it'll really come to a boil on Thursday night. Thursday night. Let's talk about Thursday night. Let's get down to the actual football of it. So right now, I think Pitt's about a 7-point favorite. It's been floating around 6 or 7 points. If you had some money in your hands and you had to put a bet down, where do you think you'd fall on that
line? I would take the points and expect West Virginia to cover. I just don't see this game getting out of hand either way, regardless of who wins the game. It's going to be so tight, and I think really when you look at these two teams on paper, like yes, Pitt's got the 17 next to their name. West Virginia doesn't have any number, but there are a lot of similarities with these two teams. They have new quarterbacks, obviously both from USC at one point. There's some question marks on at the receiver position and running back a little bit. The defense is going to be really good. The offensive line returns everybody for both teams. So there's a lot of similarities. And I just don't think that either team has that one guy that can put them over the top. If Jordan Addison was still there, that'd be a little different. But with him not being there, no Kenny Pickett, that's a tough transition. But I think for West Virginia, even though that you have a new quarterback, it's an upgrade from what you've had with Jared Dagey, number one. Number two, you have a quarterback that has familiarity with the OC already. So I think in terms of the quarterback position, I'd actually give the edge to West Virginia. But the problem is I think that defensive line for Pitt's really going to be giving West Virginia a lot of trouble. There's a lot of NFL talent on that D-line for Pitt. And I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I think Pitt's a better team right now. But
I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, we won't air that on the Mountaineers side.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you. I think there's just we listened to Pat Narduzzi talk today, and he said, someone asked him, what gives you confidence in this game? What gives you confidence in this group and in this game specifically? And he said, you can't really predict a game. You can't call a game like this, but what does kind of give him pause is the fact that there are so many unknowns. This game isn't as one-sided or lopsided as some people might think, some people at Pittsburgh might think, because you have so many unknowns. You can't know for sure until you actually step on the field and toe meets leather. Yeah. So what does go ahead. No?
Yeah, I mean 100%. And I think too with West Virginia, the secondary, that's one thing that everyone expects is going to be really bad. And I don't think that's going to be a case at all. Neil Brown even said it at Big 12 Media Days that's probably one area that's going to surprise everybody because of all those transfers. Yeah, they're coming from, the Colorado States, the James Madisons of the world, the Tyler Junior Colleges of the world, but they've logged a lot of snaps at their previous stops. So I think it's going to be a spot that's a lot brighter than what everyone else expects.
So you think Pitt might win, but I want to ask you, what does West Virginia need to do in order to win this game?
I think it all starts with situational football. And I know it sounds cliche, but there was an area that this team really struggled in last year. Situational football and being disciplined, limiting the penalties, taking advantage of the 2-minute offense, 4-minute offense, and that end of half, end of games kind of scenarios. You want to make sure you win those because typically the team that wins those areas of the game ends up going on to win the game. So I think it's also about making sure they punch, if they get into the red zone, don't settle for field goals. That's one area Neil Brown's really struggled with, and I think that's why he brought Graham Harrell in to give them more of an identity on offense and give them kind of a more clear path to the end zone. So I think those are two areas. And then I think the third thing too, really this is for both teams, is tackling, because we all know when you start the season, tackling is usually not very good. It's kind of bad. They pull back on the amount of hitting and thudding that they do in practice in the preseason to prevent injuries. But the team that tackles more cleanly, I think, will end up winning the game.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great point. I think this game is completely different being played on September 1st versus at the end of the year, last week of November, Thanksgiving weekend, Black Friday, whatever. Like that for the offenses, first of all, when you have so many unknowns and so many moving parts on both sides, like that matters. That matters. Having some continuity can help you, but it doesn't matter when you're all hitting the field for the first time. All right, so we'll wrap this up with a little score prediction. Can you give us a guess at what you think is going to be the end result on Thursday night?
So, like I said, I do think Pitt is the better team on the roster. I think they have a lot more coming back than West Virginia does. But I will say this. I can't pick Pitt, right? I can't do it. I just can't do it. I think the one reason I think West Virginia will win this game is because Pitt's going to overlook them a little bit, and they're going to look at that secondary and say, who are these guys? You know what I mean? They're going to look at that, the receivers and not understand how talented these guys really are, like a Caden Prather who didn't really play much as a true freshman, but year two, they're expecting him to become one of the better receivers, not only on the team, but in the league. And he's got that type of potential. So, and I'll say this too, I got to throw it out there. There's going to be more West Virginia fans, right? This isn't going to be
attendance talk. Oh,
my
goodness.
This isn't going to be an away game. Come on now. We all know West Virginia fans are buying Pitt season tickets for this game. So that's just the way it's going to work. I will be very shocked if there are more Pitt fans at this game, even coming off an ACC title game or ACC championship season. I've never, in my lifetime, seen a Backyard Brawl in Pittsburgh where there wasn't more West Virginia fans. So, hey, I think it would be great if it was split right down the middle. 50-50. I think that would create the best atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see how it shakes out on Thursday. Schuyler, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find your work? If you've got a Twitter handle or anything that you want to drop, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Callihan_. You can follow our West Virginia site at SI_WVU. We've got a ton of stuff coming up for the Backyard Brawl. If you want to learn more about the Mountaineers, what they're going to be like, come Thursday, we've got content almost coming out every hour, so make sure to check it out.
That's good. Yeah, please do. All right. Thanks, Schuyler.